Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Cutter One. I'm your host, Jay Just Jay, your resident troublemaker and your resident culture warrior. I hope you're all doing well. So let's get right into it, shall we? All right, this is coming to us from CBR.com and it's from Blake Hawkins. Lord of the Rings, what does Sauron look like under his armor? It's complicated. Sauron's most iconic scene in The Lord of the Rings was when he fought against Elendil and Gilgalad, but his appearance wasn't book accurate. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry. Okay. While Sauron's most notable form in The Lord of the Rings was the great eye that hovered over Barad-dûr, his most noteworthy appearance came during the dramatic introduction to the Fellowship of the Ring. The intro depicted the War of the Last Alliance as men and elves warred with Sauron's forces on the plains of Mordor. When defeat seemed imminent, Sauron emerged from his tower to do battle, wearing a terrifying set of armor. Wielding a great mace, he was indomitable until he met his match in Elendil the Tall and the High Elven King Gilgalad. Together they cast the Dark Lord down and, at least temporarily, ended his reign of terror. All right, so let's see what else we got here. While Sauron, while with Sauron playing a major role in Amazon's The Rings of Pewter series, some Lord of the Rings fans were excited to finally see what the Dark Lord looked like under his armor. After Halbrand's true identity was revealed, however, it only seemed to raise more questions. For starters, the scene where he lost the One Ring was definitely memorable, but it wasn't exactly book accurate. Sauron's physical appearance in the Rings of Pewter and what he looked like beneath his armor in the Fellowship of the Ring are very different from one another. The Lord of the Rings Sauron was a shape-shifting fallen angel. Before time began, Eru Ilúvatar created the Valar and the Maiar, the greater and the lesser angels, who participated in the creation of Middle-earth through song. But while it should have been a time of unhindered wonder and harmony, the reality was much darker. The Valar and Melkor began singing a song of discord in order to create things apart from the other Valar, and he was unsuccessful. Nevertheless, his creation of discord resulted in evil, and it wasn't long before he departed the company of the Valar and claimed Middle-earth as his own. When he left, he convinced many of the Maiar to follow after him. While many of the Maiar became Balrogs, one Maiar stood out from the rest. His name was Mairon, and he soon became known as Sauron. He was Morgoth's top lieutenant, and like many of the Maiar, he could change forms and hide his true nature. At various points in the First Age, he even took on the appearance of a vampire and a werewolf. Sauron's most famous disguise was pretty good looking. While looking like a vampire or werewolf might be beneficial at times, it wasn't helpful for subterfuge. After Morgoth's defeat in the War of the Powers, Sauron laid low for a while and crafted a new type of plan. Posing as a messenger from the Valar, Sauron took on the form of Anatar and hid his evil nature. It was during this time that he befriended Celebrimbor and they made the Rings of Power. Okay. Eventually, though, Sauron was discovered, and so commenced the War of the Elves and Sauron. The ending of that war saw Sauron taken to Numenor in chains. Yet, that was part of his plans because he succeeded in guiling the Numenorians like he did the elves. In response to their evil, the Valar drowned the island of Numenor beneath the oceans, and Sauron's physical form was destroyed in the process. You could say that, but I wouldn't say it was in response to their evil, although I guess it's kind of subjective on that. It was more in response to their disobeying the one rule, right? And i.e. trying to invade Valinor proper. But I guess that could be considered evil. I don't know. We'll discuss it in the comments. Blah blah blah. Destroyed in the process. In the Rings of Pewter, Halbrand joined Galadriel on her journey, hiding his identity behind an emblem him to be the lost king of the Southlands. Halbrand's handsome appearance, coupled with his deception, actually foiled Galadriel for a time. But when she later discovered the last king of the Southlands died thousands of years earlier and left no heir, she confronted him about his true identity. In essence, this confrontation reflects Frodo's observation in the Fellowship of the Ring that, quote, a servant of the enemy would look fairer and feel fouler, unquote. Sauron's final form was utterly terrifying. Thanks to the power of the One Ring, Sauron's spirit escaped the ruin of Numenor, but his power was diminished. After that, he could no longer hide his awful demon-like appearance. When he created a new body for himself, he could only rely on the power and malice that was stored up in his One Ring. Thus, when Sauron returned, he was the incarnation of his own hate and evil. That was why none could stand to look upon him and why Gil-galad was burned by his touch. Now, let's put a couple of theories to bed. First off, J.R.R. Tolkien never described Sauron as wearing armor of any kind. That was entirely created for the film trilogy and was likely done with the thought that it would be difficult to portray Elendil and Gil-galad in combat with a spirit. However, that wouldn't have been accurate either. At the end of the day, Sauron was a demonic spirit, but Tolkien made it clear that he did have a physical form at this point in history. Essentially, Sauron's armor was an invention, but if he had been wearing armor, it wasn't like a disembodied spirit would have been animating the suit. It would have been something far more terrifying. All right, I can kind of see where they're going with that. Don't necessarily know how much I agree with it. I mean, like everybody knows that the great flaming eye, right? In the movies per se, is sort of made up, right? That's a film thing, not necessarily a book thing. I don't know. It's hard to say because the question is sort of like subjective. What does Sauron really look like? Well, I guess however Tolkien describes Myron is how Sauron really looks like, right? Um, and anything after that is just some perverted incarnation of what Myron once was, right? Whether it be Anatar or anything else, right? So I don't know. I think it's a sort of it's a and it depends again. It's one of those questions where it depends on what you're looking at in specifically within the timeline as to what the correct answer is, right? Like there was a time where Sauron, had a physical form and he could shapeshift into the form of a bat or a werewolf, right? And that was more in line with sort of his Myron appearance. But then later on, he has a physical form in the sense of Anatar, right? Um, and when he's brought in chains to Numenor, and he sort of corrupts the Numenorians, right? He definitely has a physical form. But is it the same form that he has when he's as Myron earlier in the first age? So it's sort of an open-ended question. What I will say is this: where I will come down on this question is this: nowhere in Tolkien's books is Sauron described in any way, shape, or form like Halbrand from the Rings of Pewter. That much we know. That shape is actually 100% incorrect and is done strictly for the show. Okay. There is no mention of Sauron ever being like that. Okay, so that much we know. We can rule out Halbrand from any discussion of what Sauron might have looked like under his armor. But then again, I mean, do we really, is it something that really makes that much of a difference to the overall story? I don't think so. But, I mean, some people may want to know that, these are probably the same person that say, well, what do Scotsmen wear under their kilts? Well, I'm part Scottish, I can tell you, but I'm not gonna. So yeah. Anyway, let me know what you think. What do you think Sauron's actual appearance was throughout the ages, right? As Myron, I mean, we can all agree on sort of the depictions of Anatar and what he looked like at that point. But later on, when the War of the Last Alliance, how does he look? How did you interpret how he looks at that point? It'll be an interesting point of conversation for the comment section below. All right, that's gonna do it for this one, folks. As always, if you like the video, like the video. If you feel like sharing the video, by all means do so. It helps us get seen, and it helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you have not subscribed, I would hope you would consider turning that red subscribe button gray and joining the ranks of the army of beautiful badasses. We hold the line for Tolkien and his work and all of fantasy in general. We want to see it respected, and we want to see good adaptations of these works that we've come to love. If you are a returning subscriber, as always, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys and gals are the reason why I do this. Because I like interacting with you folks. We're a fun bunch, I think. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me on this one. As always, remember to be good, be safe, be awesome, but more importantly, stay more dorkish. Until the next one, peace.